Voice check 1 2. Voice check 1 2. Excellent, Smithers. All right, and we are operational. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. It looks like most of the regular gang here. And so that video that I was using as the lead-in trailer, everybody got signed on. Several folks had asked to see that big Gundam kit opened up, and I didn't. I might post it as a video when we're done, but as you can tell, it's a little too big to do here at the desk. So I went ahead and shot that video a little while ago, put the camera up the tripod, and then that was what you saw. There are metal parts in it, and yes, the cat took great interest in it. There's anything in a cardboard box gets her interest. Cats and boxes. I don't know what it is, but it is. So although we can chat about anything you guys like, I do have a whole sophisticated list of things here. Last night I had a Zoom session with John Kidd over at Scale Car Garage, and as the fates would have it, my brother was chatting with me on the phone, and I just put the phone by the microphone, and we wound up having like this, "Hey, John, there you are. I'm just talking about last night." So my brother happened to call about 20 minutes before John and I were going to Zoom over between Maxsmodels and Scale Car Garage, and we just started yakking. We're talking about models, so I just put the phone by the mic by the microphone, and we basically had a two-way Zoom with a telephone in. At some point, I might have my brother phone in on one of these things or something, like I did in the video. This is not Zoom. This is something called OBS that I use for the podcast, so I can't actually have, at least I don't have a commercial grade account, so I can't have someone here live. I'm sure there are I see podcasts, multiple people all the time, so maybe at some point the future, if this thing ever gets more sophisticated. Oh, I was waiting to see who said Fanzillas first. It's my wife's creation. But anyway, we wound up yakking till almost 1 a.m. and we started about 10:30, so it went on for a while, but a lot of great subject matter was covered. And one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, my brother, who is an attorney by trade and a former Air Force officer, had made the comment that because I'm always shocked by the generosity of glue troopers and model builders in general and everything, and how much so many people, mostly of our age, relative age groups, enjoy it. And he made a great observation that he said that you have to remember, for a lot of people, models are a big part of their childhood. And when we get back into model building, we get to recapture a little bit of that feeling from, when the world was a simpler place and everything made sense. And that's the old saying, the older I get, the less I know. So it was a really great Zoom session. And John also had a couple of good ideas. He actually made me make notes so I remember to talk about these things. And one of them is podcasts in general and live streams. And John made a great observation that basically the live stream has turned into the modern version of the radio show. I mean, you don't have to be watching what I'm doing if you enjoy the subject matter of podcast. In fact, a lot of podcasts just have a still picture up there or some kind of basic animation. It's a radio show. And you may have noticed a couple of the last morning videos I did were really more like a genuine podcast, just a still picture, maybe a couple of images with me just talking using this microphone. One reason the sound quality in this mic is so good, but also, sometimes I just don't feel like getting dressed in the morning, and trust me, you don't want to see that. So I just get in front of the microphone and talk about whatever popped into my head, the subject of the day. So we might be seeing some more of those in the future. And I'll still be doing the regular videos and everything as time allows. Real quick, I go to work tomorrow morning, and so I'll be gone for 4 days. I think at the moment I'm planning to take this Unicorn Gundam with me and make that my road build, provided I have time. And as I mentioned, the Gundams make good road builds because they largely snap together or press fit, and you don't have to do the okay, something weird's going on here. I'm watching the channel on the phone as a backup, and I can see here that I'm on air, you guys are talking to me, but it's still showing the loop video on the YouTube. That's just, that's not weird at all. Okay. You guys do see me, right? I mean, I see me. Technology. The reason I didn't get on a little sooner than I did was I was having issues with the audio. It turned out when I turn this program off, sometimes it will, in the guts of the program, it'll reset certain stuff, and the microphone wasn't turned on where it's normally turned on, so I had to figure that out. Okay, well, I'll just chalk it up to YouTube somehow. You know what? Let me just close this. Go back to live stream on here, and okay, there I am. All right. I don't know how it looped, but the mysteries of the machine. So anyway, so basically podcasts have turned into modern day radio shows, which I think is an interesting observation. Just like I told my wife one time when we were traveling, I looked at everybody's looking at their cell phone. And we went and saw that movie, was it Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks? And the scene where he's on the train, everybody on the commuter rail is reading the morning paper. And she just leaned over and, today it would just be cell phones. And I realized the cell phones just replaced the morning paper in that regard. It's just consolidated a lot of stuff. But anyway, just interesting observation, nothing important. So, but one of the things we were talking about last night was the inspiration for the models that you build. Now, and I imagine it goes both ways, but sometimes you know what model you want. You're inspired. So you go to an air show, see an airplane, go to a car show, see a car. I want that. And you go looking for that model. But how often do you go to the hobby shop, or did you go to the hobby shop without really knowing what you wanted, and you got inspired by what was on the shelf? Brings up this kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Did you go get the model because you like the subject matter? Or did you like the subject matter because you saw it in a model? And and as John points out, the tools change, but behavior does not. That's absolutely right. People are people. We wound up talking about that episode of the X-Files where Mulder got the genie, and when she gets her wishes, the first thing she wishes for a bag of turnips that'll never be empty. And she goes, did I mention it was 15th century France? But she talks about how she's been a genie for 500 years and people always wish for the same things. She goes, people are the same. They just smell a lot better now. We like to be creative. We like to entertain. And we also, though, I should be getting rid of this one thing up here. There, we don't need that. In fact, let me put this up there for... we get... you could parachute us into a tropical island, a Gilligan's Island situation. And provided we had found food and shelter and everything, we had to find a way. We would invent games. We'd carve things out of wood. I mean, when you think about model building, goes back to the most ancient, where they found the little carved wooden animals. There's something humans like about making things in miniature. And I don't know, maybe it's just an artistic expression. But it's put that up there. So, and of course, we evaluate, we build these kits based hopefully on what we want to do with them. And some folks take it super seriously and they do every little thing just the very best they can. They take their time. A buddy of mine would spend 6 months on any kit he made. He made master level builds, and he did it all with hand brushes, and he didn't have a lot of equipment, but what he did have was patience, and he would use rattle cans and tear paper for feathered edges, and he had all his little techniques down. But he was very slow and meticulous. And I had a 1/32 scale MiG-21 that I built in about 3 days, and it was the basic silver paint scheme. You guys have seen a picture of it. I've used it a couple times, but he's like, he couldn't get around. He couldn't, how can you do a model in 3 days? And I realized that even though he and I both love aviation and we both love model building, we have very different views on what we get out of models. He didn't have a lot of models on the shelf, but the ones he had are truly excellent. And I had a shelf full of models that, when they all melted down, it was, I think, 73 of them, which brings us to the next thing we were chatting about last night was my brother and I were in a house fire. Our bedroom caught on fire. A pillow fell against the space heater. Everybody got out okay. But it was right underneath the model shelf. And when I went to college and started taking the humanities and was looking at the paintings by Dali, who you guys have probably seen the painting of the melting clocks and whatever, the first thing that popped into my head was, wow, that looks like our shelf from the house fire. It had cooked the 3 layers of shelves at different levels, just like a barbecue does it. And the bottom shelf, all of the models had turned into puddles and just extruded over the edge and cooled when the fire department put the flame out. The next one, they'd all kind of molded down and the top shelf, just a little warped. But it looked like a painting by Dali. And I now know what a puddle of P51 looks like. We had like 73 models. I think we'd counted them at some point, and mostly in 1/72 scale. But we were shattered. Our entire collection, and of course we were like, you mean we get to start over again from scratch? Ooh. And we had my dad had a wicked sense of humor, razor sharp wit, and he made the comment, because when my brother woke up and saw the fire and woke me up, he was rubbing his eye because he's only like 8 or 10 years old. And he said, I thought I was dreaming. And my dad, without skipping a beat, just goes, yeah, well, for the insurance company, it was a nightmare. Anyway, we, of course, had to restock. So we started building models again. And, of course, we were getting a little older, so the models started looking a little bit better. Hey, Mark. And, oh, by the way, Mark, we're going to be showing a lot of your figures here later. Those are the images. If you guys saw the intro video, the images of all the figures, most of them were done by Mark from Montana. He had suggested we talk about painting figures, and we're going to do that in a little while. And that's, especially now that I'm painting, after I did that diorama thing, the Exodus video where I had to paint all those characters, I found that painting figures is a subspecialty in its own right. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. So, hey Claire. So anyway, the model collection got rebuilt mostly in 1/48 scale, and I didn't even think about it just now, but that was basically our big transition from 1/72 scale to 1/48 scale. But man, we got new shelves, and they just started filling up with models. But one of the observations that John noticed when I was telling the story was, when I was a kid, I loved to make 8mm home movies, and I needed like a military rifle, and it just so happened that at the dime store, when there were dime stores, they were selling this toy M1 Garand rifle that was about 2/3 scale, and since we were kids, it was perfect scale. Obviously made for kids. I guess I was 10 or 12 years old. So, but the problem was, for some reason, they put a scope on it. And I knew as a kid from watching enough, war movies and stuff, that the M1 Garand did not have a big scope like that on it. So I hacksawed it off. And John said, so even as a kid, you were a rivet counter. It's like, some things are just wrong. Well, that rifle, which is just plastic, just injection molded like a model, except heavier, was on the same shelf as all the models that melted. Now I kind of wish I had kept it as sort of bad modern art, because it melted and dripped, but you could still tell what it was. And it was hard to look at that shelf without thinking, there was just something about seeing all these melted models hanging down, but you could still sort of make out what they were, all extruded and everything. So, like I say, years later, when I'm taking the humanities and they're talking about Salvador Dali, I look at that and go, oh, I was doing that years ago. I don't think it was a Johnny Eagle. I don't remember, but it was about a 2/3 scale M1 Garand, and surprisingly accurate, I might add. They clearly had pantographed it off a real rifle. They just added the scope to it. I guess kids will sell it. And it was just a hollow tube. It wasn't, and it was just it was right. It didn't do anything. You pulled the trigger, it just went click, and that was it. But speaking of 1/72 scale, and this makes a good transition to some other things. You guys know I've been working on the Aurora kits, and there's something I want to correct that I've been saying earlier. Now, this is an actual Jack Linwood comp. That's the artwork I got from the Cadera estate. But I kept saying it was composite. It's not. It's a comp is short for comprehensive, and I had to ask Mike Machad about that, and he sent me the information on it. But the comprehensives, or the comps, of course, are what they do to show the art director that this is what the box art's going to look like. And, of course, he can make any changes. And the one everyone noticed on this is that the red wheel, the red center dot there in the wheel, which is probably some kind of squadron marking, of course, was removed from the actual box art. And, of course, years later, although it's the exact same kit of the exact same mold, of course, a re-release years later, they completely changed the box art. But the way I'm planning to display these is kind of like what you see here up on the shelf, with these 3 SE5s parked in front of it. And of course, two of these are still works in progress. I'm going to be talking about that in just a bit. Something kind of like that on the shelf. The 3 airplanes in front of the boxes, the new box, the old box, and the original comprehensive. Now, one of them, this one, of course, is done as I used to do it as a kid. It's completely naked build, just the decals. And this is the way I built most of my models as a kid, because I never had money for paint. One of them will be in American markings. This hasn't been decaled yet. And one of them will be in British markings with the 4-bladed prop. And something, I don't know if you guys can see it, I'll hold my hand here, but I'm actually trying to rig this one with Easy Line. There, you can sort of see the Easy Line there. And all of the cabane struts have been rigged. I don't know if this camera can make them out or not. But rigging those cabane struts, I actually did it before the wing went on, and then the cabane struts didn't line up, and I wound up breaking them when I was trying to put the wing back on. I wound up breaking everything, so I just stripped everything out, started over, built the model, and then up there with tiny little tweezers like these, trying to get everything tied up, tied off. And you can see these have a very fine tip on them. And it's, however much of a nightmare you think it is, it's worse. So that was that. So, you know, I don't use the phrase fans on the show. I say viewers because, I don't know, I just feel like I'm being a little, fans, no, people who view the channel. But my wife, God bless her, she's like, you're fans. I'm like, more, they're just people who share a hobby. That's it. But so when that big box showed up, she's just like, oh, the fans. She actually said that. It's like, I think that's going to stick. And so anyway, great fun is had by all. And speaking of that box, you guys notice I got the Snoopy built, and that's all you do to run the prop. And stop. This is from Atlantis. It's a repop. This is the little ring that the Canopy, the cowling came on. And if I remember what Pete Vetri told me, was that that was the one part that was missing. They had to redo it. It didn't fit or something. So I never actually thought I was going to get one of these. So got to thank Robert again. I haven't actually even opened this other than the where you saw on camera. And you guys may remember it's one of the Wings episodes or one of the History Channel productions. They were talking about the nuclear bombers that the Air Force had theorized, which are pretty much along this line. And the funny thing was, when I was a kid, these kind of models didn't interest me that much. But as I got older and got more interested in history, the more I started wanting these things. The 3 Holy Grail kits, of which this was one, the other was the Rapier, and the other one is the Thor by ITC, which I don't even know if an unbuilt kit of that even exists. But that's the one where you crank it up, and apparently, because ITC always had some play value in there. Everybody's got their Holy Grail kits, and I kind of curious what your guys would consider your Holy Grail kits, because some guys, obviously, it's cars or sci-fi or whatever. But this was definitely one of mine. I did not think I'd ever get one. I will be building it, but I'll probably build it up like it is here. I might use some different decals on it. A nice thing about a what-if aircraft like this is that you can kind of mark it up however you want, since, you know, it was a paper airplane in the real world. So Rob Altus says he just got a P-40B Tiger Shark. I'm going to assume that was at the 148 Revell kit, or, well, it says Revell now. It's originally a monogram kit. But I actually have 2 of those that I bought that I'm planning for my, whenever I get around to it, doing my remake of the Pearl Harbor boys, Taylor and Welch. And I tell you what, you know, they couldn't point this out in the movie Tour because they only had so much time. Taylor and Welch did everything you saw in the movie. They drove up to Haleiwa. I've heard different stories that they just grabbed a car. I've also heard that it belonged to one of them. But anyway, they drove the 10 miles out to Haleiwa to get to their planes, and apparently did get strafed on the way at one point. They're just a roving Zero, took a pot shot at them. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize is after they shot down a couple airplanes, they actually landed rearmed and went back up a second sortie during the battle. So they rearmed under fire. And that is not a small thing. So, the Mobius Bride of Frankenstein. Okay. H.G. Lynn B-70. I had that kit. B-70. I saw the B-70 at the Air Force Museum when I was a teenager. My God, I did not appreciate how big that thing was. And it sits up so high. So, the nice thing about this Snoopy, by the way, so we got the World War I motif going here, is that This would make a great entry-level kit for a kid because it is really easy to build. And a few minor challenges. You don't need much glue. It's mostly snap fit. The wings it didn't really snap into place. The headpiece took a little bit of glue, and that's something a kid can play with. The story behind this was that Monogram already had the idea on the table when they were looking in '69, I think, where they were looking at the merger with Mattel or getting bought out by Mattel. And this is the one thing they had on the table that they really, really liked, that Mattel really liked, the handlers, Ruth Handler and her husband, because they loved things that had play value. The problem was Mattel saw it as a toy, and the Monogram saw it as a model. And it's kind of a hybrid. I mean, but the problem was is that Mattel wanted, and Monogram always had like working Bombay doors or retractable gears. They always put little features. They even had the F-105, the little ejector seat that popped out. Good luck finding one of those these days. But they didn't. Mattel just didn't understand that the model business is a hobby business. It's not a toy business, and they really screwed up the marketing the next year. They actually had to have Reeder and Besser from Monogram take the sales back over. Hey, Kevin. My models are toys. A model can be a toy, but a toy isn't a model. Like all fingers are thumbs, but all thumbs are fingers. But the speaking of that, just prompted a thought. A lot of folks have recommended doing some sort of a group build, and it seems like the thing that everybody was interested in. Most people want to do the B25s. So if you guys want to do a group build, the B25 seems to be getting the most support for it. I don't think it matters what model, what version. But if you guys would be interested in a group build, I guess the B25 is as good a kit as any. A couple of folks have wanted a P40. But we can certainly do that. I'm kind of be interested to see how everybody paints theirs up. I guarantee I'll want to do Little's Raiders, because that's just, to me, that's the definitive version of the B25. But, oh, by the way, just as a complete side note, I meant to send TD a note on this. Tom Daniel, TD, I stumbled across a video yesterday. A guy in New Jersey has the Munsters cars, but it turns out that what they are is they're both third reproductions. Neither one of them were made in the 80s, but they were made from the original molds. And so they're basically Munster replicas. But something I got a little, I guess I could say a little annoyed at, as I've commented before, Barris designed a lot of cars for Hollywood, and he also did primarily just run the business. He wasn't really the nuts and bolts guy. He often subcontracted out the work. And according to Dean Jeffries, he didn't know a screwdriver from a hammer, but there was clearly a little animus between those two. But they talked about Barris a lot when they were talking about Dragula and the Munster coach. They never once mentioned that they were Tom Daniel concepts design. I mean, yeah, for those who remember that, if you saw the Tom Daniel bio, Barris knew about the show, got the contract, but he didn't know what the cars are supposed to look like. So he called TD and said, listen, here's the idea of the show. I need these things. And TD had these things to him in just a few days, all the drawings and sketches and everything. And Barris took it, ran. That's what they made the cars from. Never even acknowledged it. And I realized it was just contract work, but Barris apparently always took full credit for everything. Hey, Railroad. And, well, it looks like Fishing for Bob's already got a B-25 on the list. Chuck's looking at a Catch-22 plane. And so Jeff's got to go get one. Well, okay, guys, we will unofficially at this point tentatively say that the B-25 will be the group build, and you guys can tell me what kind of time frame you need. Obviously, I'm so backed up with stuff. Longer is better, but whatever you want to do. Yeah, TD really is. You know, one of the things I really liked as I started, and this didn't come from TD, this came from other sources. including Graham's book on Monogram, because they have a whole section on Tom Daniel. TD, yeah, he grew up during the Depression. You know, he knew what it was like to do without, and he worked very hard to get through school. A lot of very disciplined. He was in the Naval Reserves. He served during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he understood that this is a business. He didn't have this gigantic ego stake. He wasn't out to self-promote. And from everything I have ever heard, that is, guys like Barris were, and a lot of others, were pretty relentless self-promoters. And guys like TD were the people in the background that made things happen. Like, look, here's the work, give me a paycheck, on to the next assignment, no complaining, and gave the customer what they needed, which why he got so much work. Hey, John. I think that's one of the reasons. Plus, I like his work, but also I just respect that kind of ethos. And it's just like this. It's just like this channel. I constantly try to point out that this channel is not my channel. It's our channel. I'm just the guy who cobbles stuff together. But because without you guys, I'm just talking to myself, which I occasionally do, but that's another issue. The B25 may be second only to DC3. Seems to read some of the comments here. The B25 seems to be pretty much only second to DC3 for how many different air forces it served. And one of my dad's very best friends was a co-pilot on the B25 during the war. He had originally trained on the B-24 Liberator, and they needed people to go fly B-25, so he just stuck his hand up. When he first got in the airplane, the pilot that he was with, they looked at each other and, how much time do you have in a B-25? And John was like, oh, this is my first time sitting in one. Been flying B-24s. They looked at, what about you? And the pilot was like, same here. Between the two of us, we can figure it out. It has a manual. And the first time they ever flew the airplane was the two of them teaching each other how to fly it, blind leading the nearsighted. But they said the airplane was so well behaved. It was tricycle gear, just like the B-24. It had 2 less engines, was less complicated, and it flew a lot better. And everyone I said that the B-25 is just a really honest airplane. And, that kind of gets back to the old SE5 versus the Sopwith Camel debate. The SE5 originally only had a 150 horsepower engine. I think they only made like 77 of the straight up SE5s before they put the 200 horse on it, and that was the 5A. And they had trouble with the synchronizer gear for the guns. That's one reason they put that Lewis gun on top, was because the interrupter gear they were using was still pretty problematic. And that way, if you were having trouble with the interrupter gear on your Vickers gun, at least you still had that Lewis gun. You were still in the fight. And you could grab that Lewis gun and unlock it and pull it down and shoot upward. So if you got up under somebody, you could angle that Vickers gun straight up and shoot at them. And that was a handy little trick. I think it was Albert Ball or McCudden or one of them that did that a lot. But anyway, the point I was driving at was that when and by the way, this was built by the RAF, the Royal Aircraft Establishment, the Royal Aircraft Factory, the other RAF, and they'd been having obviously lots of accidents with their rotary powered airplanes, and they said, look, we want an airplane we're losing too many just in accidents. Never mind the Bosch, we're shooting ourselves down. So they wanted the airplane to be easy to fly, which is one of the reasons that it has so much dihedral in the wing. The airplane was extremely stable. It was a good gun platform. It was adequate in all regards. It was fast enough, maneuverable enough, safe enough, easy enough, stable enough, although it didn't really master any particular field. And that was one of the reasons it was just a very well-rounded airplane. I've told people, if I was in the Royal Flying Corps or the RAF and they said, okay, you're going to have squadron of airplanes, my first choice would be the SE-5A, just because it's one reason in the United States we adopted, although I think we dropped an American engine in it, but as the SE-5E. But it was just like, look, it's just a good solid airplane. In fact, somebody's just talking about the psychedelic monster. That would be an interesting thing to model. because the psychedelic monster was this wild painted B-25 that they used in the movie The Battle of Britain. It was a Hollywood airplane, had the back end cut out. They probably used it in Catch-22. But all the weird stripes on it were to make it easy to form up on. And that it was a purpose-modified aircraft. And in fact, I'll just jump over to the other side. I was going to talk about people look for things that are interesting to model, that are different. These were a couple of things that I saw that I thought if you could find a kit or a kit bash, would make some pretty interesting off-the-wall subjects. This is a firefighting turbo crop duster on amphibious floats. Now, I don't know if he could do the scoop thing like the Catalinas did, where they could land on the water, pick up the water on the fly or on the high-speed taxi on touch and go, and then take off, or if it had to be loaded at a base. It could just be that it's got the floats on it because it has to operate off of water because no runways nearby. But that would be a pretty cool airplane to make a model of. And another one I thought that was kind of cool, mainly just because of its paint job. Here you have the NATO Sentry. I guess it's an E3. That's a pretty interesting paint scheme. And I thought that would... Of course, I don't think anybody makes that decal set, so whoever pulls that one off is either going to have to be a heck of an artist or they're going to have to be a good decal maker. Another somewhat psychedelic airplane, little Shorts 330 out there hauling the cargo. And, I mean... I don't know what kind of acid trip they were on when they painted that thing. Anyway, well, the reason that they would use a crop duster is as first off, it's already got the hopper and everything installed. But my guess is that the agility. Of course, a helicopter could go the same places, but I don't think a helicopter can carry as much. Those dusters, you'd be surprised how much they can carry. That whole front end's loaded. And the crop dusters have an agitator in there. I imagine this one doesn't have it because it's not mixing chemicals. But with that turbine on there, they can get around pretty quick, and they can get to some really, really tight areas. And they don't sling a bucket like a helicopter, so you can probably be more precise. That would be my guess. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys know, but they got that F-82 flying. That's the only one flying in the world. And it was rebuilt up in Douglas, Georgia. And for $12 million, it can be yours. But there is now a real honest-to-God flying F-82 in the world. And so I just thought that was kind of some neat stuff. This is just the comprehensives. I'd taken a couple of pictures. Now, this, of course, is the Fokker D7 comprehensive, and this is the kit. Now, you guys may remember that I had the white one that I built, which is on the right, which I believe is the earlier version. The second kit, which is on the left, does not have the Fokker D7 decal for the stand, although it did come with a stand. And the third one, the blue and white one, did not come with a stand or a hole punch for a stand. So although these all pretty much came off the same mold, there are definitely different versions of them. And you'll notice this one, I've got the decals, and by the way, those decals, you can tell the cross on the tail. For some reason, those decals slipped off the paper really well, but then they broke almost immediately. So getting them on was salvaging was a real trick. They looked like they were in better shape than they were. But the one on the right is just like this SE5. It's completely naked with just the decals the way I built them as a kid. So I'm going to do the same thing with those that I'm doing with the SE5. One built naked like I built them as a kid, one built to look like the one on the box, and then one in a flashier scheme. And that's the plan on that. And thanks to all those World War I kits that were sent to me recently, I should be able to do that with several of the models and pose them like that in front of the comprehensives with a couple of different boxes and everything. Going to make a great display when I get them all built. So, this, by the way, is the work in progress. Some folks have been asking about, talking about works in progress. See what you guys are up to. There you can see some of the early rigging. That's when I first got it in there. And This easy line is really, it's really, I got some of the really fine scale stuff, and it's really makes it possible, but it is still the devil to work with. It's, here it is in the, wrapped around, I have the big rolls and I have this little fine stuff. And the problem is that it is so light, you just breathe on it. And I have a little piece right here that I laid on the airplane. And you can't even pick it up with your finger. Your fingers are just too big. You have to use tweezers, and it kinks up and kind of does its own thing all the time. And it's really hard to get a grip on to tie off or anything. Any glue will hold it, although the CO glue seems to do a little bit better job. So this will probably be the only time I bother to rig a 1/72nd scale model. I was just doing it to see if I could. And apparently, if with enough patience, but it takes 10, 12 tries for everything that I rig on it. At least, with as maddening as insane as the rigging was on the Felix stove, it was big enough you could see what you were doing. I really understand why people like to use turnbuckles. You just drill a little hole, put the cable on the turnbuckle, and just drill it in there. It's just inserting a part, and it looks good. But at 1/72nd scale, there's no way I could ever thread the needle on that. So what I usually try to do is tie it off on one anchor point, put a dab of glue on it, usually the quick drying thin glue or CA glue, and then let that give that a bit of time and heart. And then as I can, kind of like stitch the airplane, just go point to point to point to point and tack it in place without breaking the line. So it's basically one continuous line. It just seems to work a little bit better, but it's, of course, as you would guess, the more rigging you put in there, the harder it gets to get to it, because now you have other rigging that's in the way. And woo, that's fun. But when you're done, you look at it and, sense of accomplishment. Okay, we got a layered solution in progress. Curtis Ray, yep, King Tiger. Got to get cranking on that tank. Yeah, there's still a few civilian aircraft in production, and I don't know of any new ones, but unfortunately they don't tend to be the best sellers. And that's sad. So there's my little work in progress, and I actually that's the one I painted green. So I want to give a different shade than the other one. Depending on whose photograph you use, sometimes it's that all drab, and sometimes it's more of a green. So I have the SE5s in two different shades that have been painted in two different shades here. And speaking of the American SE5, I said I was going to do one. Let me show you some pictures that I got off the Fort Rucker Museum. Let's see. Oh, did I not include those? Okay. Thought I had them in here, but the American markings, the post-war American markings, what you think of the blue circle with the white star and the red dot. But during the war, we actually, the American markings were actually roundels like the British, but they put the red on the outside and the white dot in the center. And that was... I'm just looking to see if I don't have that. Let me see if I can find that picture real quick. I thought I had included it in here. Let's see. Run over here. That would be in... No? Okay. Where did I put that bloody thing? Well, I hate it when I file something someplace and... By the way, I've been getting a lot of pictures for Viewers Build 16 already, so a lot of good. So we might not have to wait quite as long for the next Viewers Build. And I know I saved those pictures. Now where on earth did I put them? But the Fort Rucker Museum has several even though it's the Army Aviation Museum and it's mostly helicopters, it does have several World War I aircraft because the Army was in fact, running aircraft originally the Signal Corps, then the Air Service. And in the First World War, all the pilots and everything, they were all still Army officers. And of course, we didn't really have an Air Force as such back then, so they just said, well, the British are using these roundels. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. And to be Americans, we have the same colors. We'll just flip it around and put the white dot in the center. And I'm irking myself that I cannot find that picture. Where on earth did I file it? Well, one thing though, while I am talking about things like that, I did, this is one of the many pictures that were sent to me that wound up in my spam folder. And it wasn't until someone suggested that I check it, and I realized there were a whole bunch of images, and this is a really beautiful tiny scale model. And I was like, man, so that's the first in line for the next Viewers Builds, along with a whole bunch of others that I found. So, oops, shame on me. So, now I'm kind of ticking myself off that I cannot find where I put those pictures, and I know I have them because I saved them. And I'm so smart, I hid it for myself. And I was just looking at those pictures earlier. Now I can't remember where they are. Still probably with the lowest production values on the internet. Well, anyway, go out to the Fort Rucker Museum website and check those. They have the SE5, a Newport 28C, and a Sopwith Camel, all on American markings. And but now after the war, the SE5s were marked with what we know today as the Army Air Corps logo with the star and the dot. I'm not sure. That's probably what I'll put this one in, sort of a post-war color. And I don't have any idea who invented that logo, but I don't know if it was. I'm pretty sure because I have an old poster that shows that logo being used when it was still called the Air Service. And originally, before the war, just the Signal Corps had airplanes because they were primarily used for communications function. But the Air Force, the idea of a new branch of service throughout the history of humanity, you'd had the Army and you'd had the Navy. And this new thing came up. No one knew how to set up a new branch. The British had the Fleet Air Arm and the Royal Flying Corps, which merged in the Royal Air Force. The Germans had the Imperial Air Service, which later morphed into the Luftwaffe. But one of the things that these air forces did for militaries around the world which kind of came into play when we have space forces, it gave them some idea of how to start a new branch of service, which was not something anybody really thought about. And then, well, what are we going to do with all these flyboys? And we'll give them their own little branch of the Army. We'll call them the Air Service and the Army Air Corps, then the Army Air Force, and then finally everybody, I want to be my own service. And of course, all the old Army generals were like, no, son, pat on the head. You're not that important. And frankly, in the First World War, they weren't. I hate to say it because I love aviation, but airplanes did not really have that big of an impact on the outcome of the war. Any of the world powers would have ended up the same way had they not even had an air service. That, of course, was not the same, 20 years later, wasn't. And when you think about the fact that we went from the Sopwith Camel to the P-51 Mustang or even the Me-109 or Spitfire in less than 20 years, it's just a quantum leap. And then of course the jet turbines, they were already playing with those things in the 30s of von Ohain and Whittle. And people always wonder why the Germans didn't put the jets in service, because they actually had them flying long before anybody else. And they go, why didn't they make them? Well, you have to remember, they were basically winning the war with what they had, and this new toy was interesting, but there was just no great impetus. We're winning everywhere we go. And the Japanese had to think long range, and of course jet engines and everything were extremely short range back then. They saw themselves having no use for it. And then by the time that they realized then it was, of course, too late. Folks are actually about the tactical aspects of fighting in the First World War, and I don't, being an aviator, I don't say this with any great relish. Airplanes played a role, and if you were being attacked by aircraft, it was an important role, or if you were flying the airplane. But the reality is that the real queen of battle is artillery, and airplanes at that point. Now, carrying a couple of machine guns and a few bombs did make a difference in any given trench, but in the overall grand scheme of the battle, things like artillery and even tanks, like at Cambrai, had a much bigger impact on the movement of the lines. Now, I'm not saying that airplanes didn't have an impact. It's just they weren't the war-winning, battle-deciding component they would be 20 years later, which is no shock. You know, it was a brand new nascent technology, and the thing that the Air Corps had going for it, and this is applied to all of the countries, the Germans, Brits, the Americans, everybody, was that there was, and more, I guess still is, a certain glamour attached to aviation, and the aviators were really good for morale. Having your plane fly overhead and chatter guns at the enemy not only would bucked up the soldiers that, hey, those are our guys, but also they made, for great headlines. If you ever seen the movie The Blue Max, that's kind of, I turned a Stockel into a hero for good military reasons. And it was kind of like that. And you think about it. A lot of people can still remember the Red Baron. The Red Baron shot down confirmed 80 Allied aircraft, and that is an impressive number. He was so well regarded that he was given a proper military burial by the Australians. But materially, just thinking, in the giant broad scope of the war, he did less damage than to the Allied forces in a couple of well-placed artillery rounds. Not exactly what we want to hear, because we like to have our heroes, but it's just the reality of the situation. Millions of rounds of artillery were fired, probably counted for more casualties than anything outside of disease. I remember when I was watching Indian Idell's The Great War, which is, they're now doing World War II in real time, but they did The Great War in real time 100 years after it happened. And you listen to the numbers and you get numb. 15,000 men killed here, 20,000 men, in a single battle, 30,000 people, the Marne and Passchendaele. And you're just like, how many people do these armies have that they can lose these numbers of people and probably twice as many wounded? And then you hear about, this guy shot down 25 airplanes or 30 airplanes. You just compare the numbers and you're like, geez. And yeah, artillery. What is that? I used to have that, and when I was in the Army, we used to have these cartoons done by a guy named Finley that were real popular. And artillery, it shows this guy in this resplendent artillery uniform lighting a little cannon aimed at all of the country's enemies. And it says, artillery, bringing dignity to what would otherwise be an ugly brawl. Yeah. Actually, the Panzer crews would have been looking at L5 Stinsons and L4 Grasshoppers. The Bird Dog came out after the war. It was a rework of the Cessna 170B, I think. Funny you should mention that. I was just thinking about this the other day. One movie that that has a popular title everybody recognizes, but is highly inaccurate, is The Battle of the Bulge. Even though I used that Panzerlehr from that. I don't want to knock the movie. It was typical movies made at that time. Obviously, they didn't have a bunch of real tigers or anything to use. But I didn't mind them using patents as tigers, or the fact the Americans were all running around in chaffies. And I have no idea how Telly Savalas survived getting the turret blown off, but somehow he's still in one piece. But they had, I think they were Spanish military vehicles they were using, so they had to use what was on hand. The one thing that cracked me up is, and of course, I'm a pilot, so this is the thing that stands out to me. The airplane they had was an O-2 Bird Dog, which didn't come out till years later, after the war. I think it's John Forsyth, and the pilot goes trying to spot him in the fog. And he's talking about, nobody's flying in this stuff. And the thing they overlooked was, they're supposed to be up there in the Scud looking for the Germans. The thing they're overlooking is that those Stensons and Cubs, they weren't instrument qualified. They didn't have an attitude indicator. They didn't have any instruments for instrument flying. They were strictly VFR airplanes. If you'd gone up in that fog, you most likely would have just vertigoed and flown right into the ground anyway. And they didn't have snow. Yeah, there was a lot wrong with that movie, but but they threw in some things that were factual, like the Scorzini's guys that were running around in American uniforms, and a few other things like that. So, and the Malmedy massacre. So they did. I think the movie, I kind of put in the same category as I put the recent production of the movie Midway, in that there's a lot wrong with it, but there's enough right with it that folks should see it. And I know a lot of people who knew nothing about the war, this is how they learned about like the Malmedy massacre or what the Battle of Bulge even was. So it put it into the public consciousness, even if it was an inaccurate portrayal. So what was something else? Okay, now one of the things some folks had said let's talk about, and I think it's a great idea, is fixing boo-boos. Something I have become the master at because I make a lot of mistakes. Now, there's two ways. The thing I think most of us mess up as much as anything is canopies. This is my FT5. That's a trumpeter kit, and it's the big 1/32 scale job. My brother got that for me. Not the greatest kit on earth, but interesting. And I think trumpeter's the only one to ever make the FT5. The FT5 is basically a Chinese-made Big 17 with a back seat. The Russians never made this plane. That was a domestic Chinese redesign, probably judged by the canopies based on the MiG-15 UTI. Well, when I put it together, the windshield fogged, and pretty badly. Even the canopy did a little bit. And the way I was able to salvage it after about 3 tries, I tried buffing it out. And some people use that, was it diamond polisher's cloth? There are a couple of videos on YouTube. I've never used it myself, but apparently there are a way to polish canopies and get them real clear that way. But what I wound up doing was I used a couple of different things to clean it with. Mostly isopropyl alcohol. I might use a little thinner, but every time it would dry out, it would cloud the windshield again. So what I wound up doing was cleaning it, and then as soon as the I'd shake and dry out before it could cloud up, I soaked it in future floor wax and pull it out and let it drip dry, and that prevented it from reclouding it. That little bit of haze you see on there is actually the future because it's on there so thick. So that was one way I was able to salvage it, and that was just experimentation. Luckily, I had not actually damaged the acrylic part, because once you do that, polishing it out is your only option. However, there is another solution that one of the viewers sent me. When you make a boo-boo on glass and you don't think you can fix it, cover it up. Run away, run away. And he made this nice little kit and trad diorama and just covered up the messed up windshield. And personally, I think it looks fine. You know, it actually adds a little realism to it. So that's pretty much the other option. And I still have the original bottle of Future, which I use on canopy. And every once in a while, I'll get out of step and forget to do it and pay for it. But I haven't fogged any canopies lately. But the old cover-up technique is, and it's sad because, you know, he's really got a nicely done paint job and everything. A lot of work clearly went into that. And since we tend to put the canopies on last, a golden opportunity to mess it up. that buffalo I just did got a little underspray. I had the pressure down on the air gun, but some of it snaked through a little crack I didn't see and splattered the inside of the canopy. But fortunately, it was light gray and it was super thin. It just looked like crazing on the glass, so I left it there. Battle damage, of course, yes, Chug. Battle damage is excellent, especially on armored vehicles. And but I've used it on airplanes too. Anybody here ever heat up a needle to make bullet holes in your models? And another possibility is, if you're doing World War I era, German World War I aircraft, and you mess with the paint scheme, buy the lozenge pattern decals and just slap it over the whole wing. And I found these on eBay. Apparently there are plenty of them out there. And this is made by, what was it, Attica? Something like that? Aviatik. But big decal can cover a multitude of sins. Obviously, you can also use replacement parts if you mess something up. No mistakes, only artistic expressions. There you go. That's a ticket. And speaking of such things, still staying sort of in a World War I motif, this is Mark from Montana's Rick Tuffin in a triplane. We talk about painting figurines. Those all, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, are metal etch guns, and you have to think how hard it is to work with something that small, and they came out looking good. But wrong one. Let's see. Here it is. That's a pretty impressive paint job when you consider how tiny that thing is. On 1/72nd scale, all I do is put flesh on the face, brown on the flying cap. Usually the uniform's green and maybe a couple of silver dots, because that's all I can pull off. But he's even got the blue Maxsmodel on his collar painted. That's just talent and practice. And he's made some really nice figurines. This is his Ernst Udet figure, and he's even managed to get an expression on the face, very nicely molded and everything. So I'm very impressed that these 1/48 scale figures are done that well. And I was just watching a couple of videos on how people are painting faces. A lot of guys don't paint the eyes because they just don't have anything that can get that small. When I try to paint the eyes on 1/32, and the rare occasion I try to do it on 1/48, I make white the base color and try to paint around, maybe get a blue dot in there with a pinhead or something, and then just try to paint around it without it bleeding in. That's about the best I can do, put a couple of eyebrows. But at 1/48 and smaller, most people, the most they'll do is they'll just put some wash up under the eyes and nose and lips just to accentuate the character a little bit. They won't go into this level of detail. And now I do try to go in when I was doing like the figurines from Immense Miniatures. This is Jim Clark. This isn't mine. This is also Mark's. But you look at the fantastic detail that Mark Tyler put into these busts and everything, or into these characters. I'm not sure what scale that one is, but even his 124, 125 scales show that level of accuracy. So when you have something like that, you really want to try and make it work. I don't remember. It seems like at some point somebody was actually making eye decals that you could just, once you paint a figure, you just wet it and just drop it in there. There's these little slivers with the eyes. I don't know if I'm imagining that or if that was something I really remember. For some reason, I seem to remember it, but that would be an interesting thing to try, an eye decal. So, not sure how that would work, but and there he is. Mark saying he's just off-white for the eyes and a dot of blue for the 148. And that's, if you can, I would probably, knowing me, I don't know, I'd probably do it backwards, put the blue and then try to put the white around it. For me, it seems to be easier to go from the inside out, but that's because I'm a ham-fisted gorilla. But I've tried it both ways with and it's one of those things that at distance, it looks okay. Yeah. Flesh wash, yeah. Army painter. But you try. Oh, okay. So eye decals were a thing. Okay, it's not my imagination. They look cartoonish. All right. You guys have seen my wife has done the dolls and everything. In fact, I put her Gina Carrera in the last viewers builds because she actually made all those components. She's working on a Django or a Mandalorian right now, although it's a large scale one. But she's probably spends more time on the eyes than any other single thing. And even though they're 1/6 scales, just she'll be in there with her magnifying glasses and everything, and just the patience and everything. Archer makes eye decals. Okay, well, at least I know I'm not making. My mind's not playing tricks on me. And here's some of Mark's work. These and if Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are just a couple of Aurora, out of the box Aurora guys, aren't they? In fact, let me blow that up a little bit so you guys can see it better. And that's really nice work. Okay, on the right, both of them have that sort of, do I really have to go flying today, Sergeant? I really don't feel well. But that would look that just looked great in any model. Okay, Verlinden also did eye decals. Okay, well, I'm glad. Yeah, those are old Aurora pilots. Now you see, and there's really nothing wrong with the old Aurora pilots. They're good shots, but you see how much that the taking time with the paint job can really pump a lot of life into look at this. And let's face it, the people are the hardest in models. People are the hardest thing to paint, and to have them look at all authentic. And here's a little more of. This is another one which is just an out of the box pilot, but again, time, patience, attention. And just so you understand how it matters as far as context goes, to look at the pilot just done like this, he looks great. But here's the Graham Hill, and you look at him in the car, and that really makes so much difference. The whole thing, it makes a what's the word I'm looking for? It all fits the universe. And I like the fact that he's able to dull the face, get the shine on the eyes. And Mark, did you fill those eyes in with clear wax or something, the goggles? Or because it may just be the shadow, but it looks like a smoke tint to them. And the layered solution pilot is unusable. I agree. It's the same one that comes in the GB. Some of those Hawk/Testers kits, the pilot figures in them, for an open cockpit model especially, they're almost useless because they have no detail. The GB's not so bad because of the canopy over it that hides some of it. Mm-hmm. It's canopy glue over the eyes. Okay, great. That's a great effect. And the reason I'm so impressed with it is you got to remember, we're really zoomed in on this where you can see everything. And what scale is that, Mark? 1 to 25, 1 to 24? I'd love to be able to do that in 1 to 32nd or 1 to 48, but that's not going to happen. Well, the time and effort shows. Here's some more Mark's figures. Let me zoom these out so you can see them a little better. There's, I think that's Eric Hartman, second from the left. But every one of those is beautifully done. Every one of them, and something that Mike Machat told me was, and it was referring to box art, is that box art has to tell a story. And I see the same thing here with these, with the painting of these characters. They tell, is like a diorama. You can sort of see what each one of them's up to. On the left, we have the guy who, he's got the goggles down, so you figure he's in the seat of his car or his plane, probably getting ready to start. You got Hartman there with his ball cap and his hands in his pocket, so he's probably walking around the airplane waiting for something to happen. The other guy in the standing mode in the middle there is, probably walking out to the plane, goggles up. We have the other guy who looks like he's sitting at the controls ready to fly. The other guy looks like he's sitting on the wing, happy-go-lucky pilot in the glamour pose. And the guy on the right's clearly flying his airplane and looking for the enemy. So each one of these characters by himself, before you even put him on the diorama, is sort of telling part of the story. And given that ultimately stories are about people, one could make the argument that the figures are the most important part, because, as much as we all love machines, the story is about the people. Don't worry, Claire. Mine look like they're terrified of zombies. This was a particular favorite of mine from where figures are concerned, from the last viewer's build, and a lot of attention paid to the detail, right down to the if you notice the US on the holsters, the snaps on the belts. I mean, a lot of subtle detail, the dirty uniforms, the works. I just thought that obviously it tells a story by the action of what the two guys are doing, but a lot of attention was paid, because I have a tendency just, where it comes, because everything, when I was in the Army, everything was the same olive drab by design, be low profile. But here you have the belt and the canteen and the holsters, all different colors, all look accurate. Got the spats over the boots or the ankle wraps, and, I just, having been in the infantry, I can appreciate that there's more time and effort went into this than it probably looks like on the surface. I don't know if those are resin or plastic, but nicely done. Yeah, Kevin, all of mine come out looking cross-eyed. Another really good one. It's this little Confederate figure, and right down to the, the patches on the pants. And I particularly appreciate, I don't know if it's actual real cloth or not, is that sash. It has a cloth look to it. I don't know if he put cloth over it or if that's painted, but just a lot of attention to the minor details. And from a distance, you would think, if you were to take that picture, put it against some kind of a background, appropriate background, and shoot it in sepia, you'd think it was a real person. Yeah, I was in the infantry, 101st. Now, I know this next one is larger scale. Yeah, it is beautiful shading on him. It really is. And this is one that I found, yeah, gel pen might work. Certainly worth trying. Remember, there's no cheating in model building. The grille on that Fokker D7 that I, let's see, where is it here? Huh. I was, where's my, let me see, where's that picture image? All right, looking for it. Hang on just a second here. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, there it is. This Fokker D7 that I actually just did this morning. The grill, the vent grills in the back, and the radiator up front. Now the engine and the guns are painted with acrylic, but the intake up front, the radiator grill, and those little vents under the struts, that was all done with a pointy black, not a felt tip, but it was a black, I guess it was a gel tip pen, because I found with the brush I kept getting bleed over. And of course you're zooming in real tight, but it helped. It was much easier to do it that way and keep it kind of color inside the lines than it was to use a paintbrush. So again, no cheating when it comes to painting a model, except having someone else do it. Let's see, where was this one I really appreciate. Now, and of course, this is larger scale. This is from the last viewer's build, but the person who did this submitted several of these bust and body figures at a larger scale. But I just thought that was just some beautiful work. And in fact, let's see the whole thing. Transform, fit to screen. There. Now you can see the whole thing. And I just think it was just a beautifully done piece. And he had about 4 or 5 of them done like that. The beard, yeah. It really does. It's just, there had to be some technique in there. I'm sure Shepard Payne would have been proud of that one. Oh, I couldn't tell you who it is. My European, Celtic, and English history is horrible. Typical American. But beautiful work. And judging by the tricorn hat on the ground, I'm assuming he's a Celt or Scot fighting the Brits or fighting with them. I don't know. But again, it tells a story. And where do you get the tartan paint? I don't know. Well, guys, that was the bulk of the things that I had set up to chat about today. So, what else do you guys have going on? Oh, typical American. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it didn't happen outside our borders. We're probably clueless to it. För ways of making your talk. That's just, I don't know. I never get tired of doing that. Oh, hey, there's, yeah, I should look at that. Show you something. Now this is Bluetooth. Did I run the battery down? Nope. Okay. I'm a nerd. This, Affirmative,
Captain. Enterprise out.
I sometimes carry this with me, Bluetooth linked to my phone, and yes, it is a working Bluetooth extension to my phone. Dial there got away from me.
Yes, Captain.
And it even has a working more dial. And my brother's like, well, I've got this Christmas ornament. You mean like this one?
Condition red. Condition red.
Yep. I'm an old cop. I never go anywhere without a backup. And this, which I had to CA glue back together, this is a resin Prop Master replica. It doesn't function, although the hand phaser does come out of it. And it's like a it's got a lot of great build quality in it. It's made from a casting. This thing was $95 in the 80s. And my brother got it, and I've been sort of taking care of it while he hasn't. I mean, it's his. He gets it back when he wants it, but now if it only worked. But unfortunately, being resin, it's a little bit delicate, and CA glue is the only thing I found that seems to bond with resin. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you, baby. Sure be coughing, so I get a little tea. Try to clear my throat and eat at least 30 minutes prior to these things so that I'm not going all the time like you guys may recall I was pretty bad about doing. Ow. Yes, I was a kid that would touch something and go, ow, ow, ow. By the third time, I'd realize it's staying hot. Oh, she takes good care of me. Which is a horrible idea. Use this to make a shell or something, and put a real 22 in there. I don't know why. Why did I even just have that idea? Now some idiot's going to do that, and I'm going to get in trouble for it. It is hot tea, Earl Grey, hot. It was terrible. It's Earl Grey, hot. Zinc chromate yellow. A Fishing Bob, guys. The only paint I've ever seen labeled zinc chromate was green, and most of you probably know zinc chromate came in both green and yellow variants. You're probably going to have to mix it. A zip phaser. That's exactly. I don't recall ever seeing a zinc chromate yellow paint or pre-mixed, but I wouldn't think it'd be that hard to come up with something. That yellow is pretty banana. Well, not banana yellow, but I can remember seeing that on stuff too. No idea. I don't know if it was the manufacturer or there was a difference in the two of them. By the way, zinc chromate, the same guy I was telling you about that flew B-24s and later the B-25, my dad's friend, had told me that they went down to, they were based at Keesler, down on the Gulf Florida, it was Keesler's Louisiana Gulf Coast, I think. Anyway, they had to go up to Detroit, to Ypsilanti, to pick up an airplane, brand new one. And this is back when they had when Ypsilanti was going great guns. I mean, they were rolling a plane out like every 51 minutes. These are 4-engine bombers, by the way. So he went up there, and their airplane hadn't rolled off the assembly line yet. So they spent a couple of days up there just drinking beer and waiting for their airplane to get ready. And when it was ready, they were rolling. A lot of folks don't realize is the airplanes were painted at the local unit. They came out of the factory. Frequently, they were naked. Depends on which company, what the contract called for. Because like all the promotional footage, you see the Hellcats rolling out in full paint. And maybe in the later war they were doing that. But he said these airplanes, the B-24s, when they got them, they were largely rolling out just naked. Or at least the inside was naked. The outside may have had the paint on it, but they would get all their squadron markings and everything to where they were going. And I think he did say there was a big number paint just hand painted on the side, so you knew you were getting the right airplane. They would come out with all the documents for the airplane, you'd sign for it, off you go. He said the airplane was obviously, I mean, they had to fly off like 6 or 9 hours or something, make sure everything worked, their systems checked. So they picked it up. And the inside of the airplane, I assumed would have been covered with zinc chromate. He goes, not all of it. There were a lot of the fuselage parts and everything were just said like 3480 or whatever the type of aluminum they were. They just rolled off the sheets with the printer stamp still on them. Then when they got them down to Keesler, then everything got painted. I would have thought they would have put the zinc chromate on at the factory, and maybe sometimes they did, maybe sometimes they didn't. I seriously doubt they did everything the same way for the duration of the war. But he said, no, when we got it, that thing was naked as a jaybird. And they parked in the revetment at Keesler, and they came out and painted everything. And I remember seeing mechanics using zinc chromate, because my dad was an E&P mechanic. He'd been a mechanic in the Air Force. And they would be blotching corners where they were worried about corrosion or something. And apparently that stuff flakes off. I guess it doesn't adhere, that doesn't bite into the metal, because they're frequently touching it up. And so I guess every factory is different. That's a good question. And I have seen the yellow zinc chromate also. Mission models and AK Interactive do chromate yellow. Well, there you go. And I love going to museums, and it's beautiful to see these aircraft that are restored. Of course, they're in a condition that probably no line aircraft ever saw, because they're museum pieces, so everything's just done like a piece of artwork. And the some aircraft, it kind of breaks my heart, and it's some missilery too. When you see them on display, if you know a lot about aircraft, you get close, you go, something's wrong here, and you can't quite put your finger on it. a lot of the aircraft that are on display are cobbled together out of parts they can find, and sometimes they have parts from other aircraft just to fill the void because it's the best they could do. At NASA, there's a Titan II on display in the rocket garden, and I didn't think twice of it. It's got the big twin Titan engines, which, by the way, here's your trivia. The Titan missile, and this is a kind of hard thing to wrap your head around. The Titan missile has what looks like two engines, the Titan II. And let me grab, do I have no, that's an Atlas. It's on right here on the desk, but it's an Atlas. Let me grab a picture real quick. And I only learned this recently. I may have known it, but YouTube wants to know what you're doing. Image. Okay. Oh, here. Oh, perfect. Let me just copy that. Stick it into Paint. Bear with me. Okay. Now, image plus image. Okay. Browse, and there it is. Okay, guys. I want you to look at this. And at first blush, you go, okay, that's a Titan, and it has two engines. Actually, it kind of doesn't. How to explain this? You'll see that there's a big center section right between the engine nozzles, a piece that sticks down, and a big section that sticks up. Well, Imano, don't forget about a piece of the action where they go back to the planet that emulates the 1930s gangsters. They had Tommy guns and 45s in that one. And the greatest radio commercial I've ever heard when Spock's trying to use the radio. Bang, bang, the sweetest little automatic. My brother and I still spoof that today. And then, of course, yes, there was Zagon, the Zions, or whatever. One of the reasons they did those is that the Star Trek writers were told they had to use what was on set. So whenever the studio had made a movie, like a World War II movie with the Germans, here's all these uniforms and equipment, write a script around that. They'd shot some gangster movie, we had all these gangster costumes and Tommy guns and old cars, used that. So a lot of them, they were actually written to use what the studio had on hand. So anyway, back to the Titan. I'll just expand this a little more. What you have down here is a single engine, a single combustion chamber, or a single, it's not a single combustion chamber, a single fuel feed pump that feeds two combustion chambers. And this caused let's call it a debate about what makes a rocket engine a single engine or a multi-engine rocket. To look at it, you see two nozzles and think two engines, and there's two combustion chambers right above the nozzles. But they're both fed by the same feed pump mechanism, same injector mechanism. A lot of rocket engineers say that the fuel pump and the feed mechanism are the engine. They're what make everything happen. The combustion chamber is just where it mixes and goes boom and gets blown out the rear end. And so some people consider this a single engine rocket with two nozzles, and other people consider it kind of in its own world. It's not, and that's right, that was Zephram Cochrane used to make his Phoenix with. But it's kind of weird because it doesn't fall comfortably into a single category. It's also the only rocket that makes that weird sound just before launch. In fact, some documentaries have pointed this out, and I think Amy Shearer Title may have pointed out that when the rocket ignites, you hear this before they light off, and that, I believe, is the fuel pump chemically pressurizing. I forget if it uses a gunpowder charge or whatever, but or how it, I think it's a chemical charge, but that spools it up to hit both of the chambers at the exact same time from a common feed. And so the Titan's kind of not really a twin engine rocket, and kind of is. Yeah, hybrid's probably as good a phrase as any to describe it. And so I just thought that was one of those little things that, yeah, one carb, 2 cylinders. That's actually a pretty good analogy. That, in fact, that's almost exactly what it is. And when you have one carburetor feeding 2 cylinders, it's considered one engine. And yeah, if you can find that pretty easy on the out in the world. A lot of YouTube videos of Titans taking off. Hear that noise when they fire up. And it's the only rocket in the world that does that. So that's where we're at with that. As far as this Gundam Zero Custom, I'm sure I'm going to do a build video on it when I get it done. And yep, turbo pumps. Real quick, and I think it was a book Countdown got in this in some detail. One of the biggest problems the V2 rockets had was the turbo pumps. And you cannot electrically or mechanically reliably run a pump that hard. It has to be done some other method. And Von Braun, when he was working on the A4, later called the V2, he was trying to find a way to get the fuel. And he had this sort of spider web feed mechanism that he would later simplify when he was working on the Redstone, which is, like it or not, it's a V2 knockoff. So he had seen the fire department. He had seen how the fire trucks, those pumps they had, and he goes, that's the kind of system we need. And what they realized is that the fire department, as hard as they were pushing water out, they weren't still giving exactly the kind of precision and everything that they needed. They had to have a power source, a PTO, and that wasn't really going to get it with rocket fuel. One of these, rocket fuel not only has to be completely pure, it has to be pumped through at a very steady pressure with no air bubbles. You get an air bubble in rocket fuel and you're begging for an explosion. In fact, that's why a lot of you see blow up. And the movie October Sky with Jake Gyllenhaal, where the kids are getting in West Virginia getting rockets, they talk about they need a stabilizer for their fuel so it'll burn leaving because the rockets keep blowing up. Oh yeah, absolutely. You want to see the Beta 1 box here? Let me set Snoopy aside. Put the Royal Aircraft Factory SE5s over here. Disperse my aircraft. Oh. Put my zip phaser over here. So, after the war, what they realized, they may have done it during the war, but they realized the one way that you could guarantee to get a fast-turning pump that was not going to be interrupted was a chemical reaction. And the one they used on most American rockets for a long time, I believe, was putting, no, not potassium nitrate. Anyway, they had a silver grill inside of a tank, and they would pump in, hydrogen peroxide. They would pump in hydrogen peroxide. I think it was hydrogen peroxide, which is, like what we use to clean acrylic paints. But when it hits real silver, it causes steam. They have what they have called a catalytic reaction. So it was guaranteed that if you fired hydrogen peroxide, ran it over this plate, you were guaranteed to get X volume of steam. That would go into a tank meter, the valve, which guaranteed you a constant pressure, and then that steam would leave through a tube at a very predictable constant pressure. And this meant that you could run it through a turbo pump that was guaranteed to run at a very fixed RPM. Everything, and there was no way, this was a catalytic reaction, other than turning the hydrogen peroxide off, there was no way to stop it. So what you got was extremely high pressure, extremely high RPM, and a very small, lightweight system that was incredibly reliable. In fact, it could not fail unless something ruptured. And that's how they were getting the fuel into the Saturn V F1 engines and all these other rocket engines extremely reliably with a very predictable pressure and everything. It took a long time to work it out. The big problem they turned out having with the F1s was the shock wave in the combustion chamber that was blowing the engines out. They finally figured out a waffle pattern would break up the shock wave. They never actually were able to do the math on what about it worked. They just knew it worked and went with it. I think it's still a little bit of a mathematical mystery today exactly how that waffle pattern broke the shock wave up, but it did, and that's all that mattered. Oh, by the way, I was watching, somebody sent me a link I got a shout out on from, I think it was Doug, who was on, I think he was visiting Andy's channel, and I thanked him for that. And great guys, they run a hobby shop, great work. But speaking of Andy's, I don't think it's any big secret because he's been sending out a lot of emails to friends, but Andy Anchus, who basically is the brains behind the Aurora files, unfortunately is having health issues again, so he's had to stop. We've had to stop working on those. I hope it's a temporary situation. So want to wish him well, and hopefully he'll his sister's been a real help for him. So here's hoping that Andy does feels better soon. Okay, now for something completely different. If I told you to create a diorama using two completely unrelated genres, and given that I've made such landmark feature films as Godzilla versus the Wehrmacht, it's pretty obvious I'm going to go with World War II and some kind of kaiju. But what two completely unrelated genres? Doesn't matter what they are. I mean, it could be a sailing ship and a spaceship. What do you think you would? What two completely different genres would you make a diorama out of? Maybe I'm being a little too harsh. Well, I guess genre would be the right word. My Godzilla versus Metaluna, they're both basically sci-fi. That's even though that I've used two different movies and made one creature much bigger than it really was. It's still, in science fiction. But actually, I need to catch up on reading the comments here. How about hot rods versus zombies? Oh, that would just be Death Ray 2000, sort of. Hey, okay. A Spaceman in the Court of King Arthur. Wild West and current sci-fi. We got aliens versus cowboys versus aliens. Great movie. God, that doesn't get old. Pony Express meets Tron Lights. That's an interesting idea. If I see any really good ideas, I'm probably going to steal them. World War II, Beast with 20,000 Fathoms. Good one. Biplane spaceships. Okay. So just source the B-25 for the group build. All right. Well, I'll have to crack that one and start working on it. I believe that is Bill Campbell artwork. Good eye. I think it is. Well, Sherman Tank at Little Bighorn. They had a Stuart Tank at Little Bighorn in an episode of Twilight Zone. Dinosaurs versus GIs in South Pacific Island. One of the Godzilla movies kind of went there. Frankenstein Family Vacation. All right. Fast and the Furious versus them. I like that. World War during Egyptian times. Okay. Twilight Zone did the... okay. Star Trek with Planet of the Apes. I like the idea of giantism, so insects versus Nazism. Yep. Yeah, the Stuart Tank at the Little Bighorn. They never actually asked why they went with their pistols and carbines instead of taking the tank. I'm pretty sure an M3 light tank would have been a heck of a game, or M5 light tank would have been a heck of a game changer at the Battle of the Bighorn. Doolittle raid against Monster Island. All right. Spaceman and vet from Heavy Metal. I remember the beginning. Yeah. Who knew that would be a harbinger of things to come when they'd shoot a Tesla into space. The Cowboys versus Aliens. I love that movie. Dollar Ride. Fantasy Island versus Gilligan's Island. Okay. So the Valley of Guanji. Wright Brothers meet F-22. King Kong versus... I think they did King Kong versus the biplanes. Hitler having tea with bi... Oh, ow. Have an idea for a Fanzilla t-shirt. Make it. Make it, and then send pictures. Sergeant Rock comic, yeah. The Predator on the HMS Victory. I think it was a Stuart. Pretty sure it was a M3 or an M5, and it was a late model probably. An M42 Duster Roman battle. You learn why they call it a Duster. NASCAR Roman Chariot. Adam's Family versus Jersey Shore. Herbie versus the Banana Splits. Oh, those guys would go right together. Don't anyone dare. Oh God, there it is. Tra la la. You say banana split. I can't even order a banana split without hearing that song now. Greasers and hot rods mounted with 50 cals versus the SS in Africa. I would pay to see that one. One buzz bomb towed by Tom Prudhomme's funny car. Final countdown. There you go. We can do this all day. I tell you what, real quick, let's go ahead and do a little inventory on the Beta 1, see what we got here. I've been kind of meaning to do this anyway. Let's take a look at the instruction sheet. Yeah, that all looks pretty straightforward. Ha! They even have instructions on how to build your own jet atomic engine. Well, that was nice of them. We'll clean up. Some of these decals might be usable, but I think I can replace them with stuff, with more modern stuff. As probably yellowed and everything, but all right. Oh, okay. Yeah, baby. One thing I didn't realize is that the crew sits tandem in a, like, you know, completely separate, but they're tandem. It's not a side-by-side cockpit bomber crew. Or heck, I could just build this while we're sitting here. Man, why does the theme from Fireball XL5 keep popping into my head? Well, I guess we know what music I'm going to use for this. Yeah, most of this is still okay. Some of this has been bagged. All right, good. There's the little plastic translucent clear flames that shoot out the back. This thing flies along spewing radioactivity across the countryside. There's your little... I remember my brother had the Hawk Gimme 163 and it had one of these sticking out the back of it. It's actually kind of cool. And the question is, do I want to make it wheels up or wheels down? I mean, something like that so slick, it begs to be made wheels up on a stand, but wheels down, you know, you can set it on the shelf, and I don't know. Okay, whoops. All right. There's the wings. Oh, wow. The receipt's still in here. This is from Kohl's, Canada's leading bookseller. Dig that price. $1. Let's see, it's 50. Oh, this was a 50-cent kit. Apparently they bought 2 of them. So, 50, 5-cent tax, $1.05. And June 17th. That's not a date that says 3083 on it. I don't think that's any kind of a date. But it was July 17th. That's staying with the box. That's to me is important. That's all part of it. You know, in a way, I'm glad everything's off the trees. I have a little bit less guilt about building it. And I will build it. Probably pretty soon. In fact, that may even stay here in the bedroom. And of course, I'll build the bow mark also, and I probably will put this with the CF105, and that will prompt me to get to working on that. And I'll probably put the 2 of them. Somebody had a great idea. Have the CF105 bombing the bow mark site. And you know, a lot of those guys that worked on the CF105 in Canada were hired by would become Convair, later General Dynamics, and wound up coming to the States, bringing all that brain trust with them. So when Diffenbacher killed that 105, it was the biggest favor he could have done the U.S. defense industry. And I don't think any of that was by accident. Spartans versus lizard creatures from Galaxy Quest. I like it. Battle Right Mechs, Battles 1066, Africa Corps, and Norman's Spetsnaz. I wish. Yeah, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. Red Baron versus Aliens. Ooh, I could do something with that. Yep, the Baka Bomb also had the flame. Just reading through the comments here. Diefenbaker. Okay. Baker, not Balker. Oh, that was my communicator shutting down. All right, so we'll make it official since people are already buying B-25s. The B-25 will be the group build. Now we need to work on a time frame. I don't want anybody to feel rushed. Maybe I'll have to have the one of them facing the opposite directions. Yep, everybody's got the earworm stuck in them now. Well, as long as we're going there. Let's see here.
Okay, Venus?
Okay, Steve.
Right. Let's go.
Let's see. All right, guys. What else we got going on? February 29th. 7th Cavalry versus Hannibal's Elements. Okay, yeah, Bill, they apparently most folks wanted to do a group build of a B-25. So that's what we decided to do. We're just setting up a time frame. So anybody that wants to do it, I'll have plenty of time. Okay, we're seeing different dates. Probably Snoopy versus King Kong. That'd make a great little cartoon. You know, you could use the old Peanuts animation Snoopy in one of the King Kong cartoons and probably edit those up. Yeah, it doesn't matter what scale. That's right. Everybody get to work. Anybody wants to do that, all we have to do is figure out when. Doesn't matter what version of the B25. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Cannibal only had a couple of them alive when he got to the other side of the Alps. Oh yeah, Stingray. Stand by for adventure. Anything could happen in the next half hour. 15th of September. Labor Day. Okay, we're seeing a trend towards sometime in September. Well, I'll tell you what, my birthday is September 4th, which is sometimes Labor Day. How does that grab you guys? Is that too soon? Doesn't Atlantis put out a B-25? Stop it. Full contact modeling. Just build what you want. Just make it a B-25. And we'll say my birthday is September 4th, which, by the way, is my 60th birthday. Oh, you know what, though? Depending on what happens with the pandemic, my wife and I may be gone to do something on my 60th birthday. But, tell you what, let's just, hold on, let me get a calendar real quick. Okay, Saturday, how about, okay, the weekend, Saturday, September 18th. How does that grab you? So Doolittle birthday, when was Doolittle born? The interweb. Time to do the old man switch, swap glasses here. All right, we're looking at, well, he was born on December 14th. Might be a little far. Although he passed away on December 27th. Excuse me, September 27th. So September 27th is a Monday. What do you say? Oh, that's, how about September 25th? That would be a couple of days before the anniversary of his Doolittle's passing. And nobody has to be at work, hopefully, on a Saturday. Well, the only problem is the 15th is a Wednesday. I'll tell you what. Instead of trying to what I'll do is, I think I have us a solution. He passed away on September 27th. So what I'll do is get me your images and pictures and video and whatever you want of your builds, say by a couple of days ahead of time, and I'll release a video on the anniversary of his passing on September 27th. How about that? All right. So give me the stuff by the 25th, and I'll release the video on the 27th. Hold on. I got to make a note of that. Nope. Where did I just put my little notepad? Oh, hold on. Oh, there it is. Got it. B-25 Group Captain. Group Build video release on September 27. So you'll need to get them to me by the 25th so I have time to put it together. Now, hold on. If you build cars, I'm thinking maybe you can build like a Jeep or some kind of support vehicle that would go with it. You know, work it. Doesn't really matter what scale, but remember, it doesn't matter what scale, doesn't matter what nation, doesn't matter what version of the B-25. It can be a Dutch B-25, it can be a South African, whoever operated the equipment. It can be a post-war, it can be a Korean War era, it can be a J, an A, a C, doesn't matter. I'm going to do the Doolittle Raider. Excuse me. But you guys do whatever, just a B-25. And if you don't do planes and you do cars and stuff, maybe some ground support equipment, a Jeep, a truck, command vehicle, staff car, something like that. And if you're a ship guy and you don't feel like doing an airplane, you can always do the USS Hornet, because that's where they launched off of. So there's that. I've actually seen several guys have done builds with all the little B-25s on there, but I would consider that part of the same thing. Oh, I'm nowhere near 100,000 subscribers. I'm shocked that I have over 20,000, but yeah, you can do a civilian one. You can do the psychedelic monster, if you want to do that one. Or you can dream up your own pattern. Make what you want. If you want to paint the thing like a 60s hippie van, or do a captured one in German markings, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can kit bash one with jet engines, and I'm looking out the window. There's someone backing a boat trailer down the street. Doing a pretty good job, too. Yeah, Spencer Tracy bus would work if he's in the Doolittle uniform. And so there's whatever you want. But I don't think Eisenhower ever used a B-25. He did fly the smallest. It's actually in the Air Force Museum. He had this property he liked to go out to, and the Air Force acquired. Well, they already had him in inventory. An Aero Commander, the high wing light twin, and it would fly him out straight to the property. And it's considered the smallest Air Force One in history. They're not counting the helicopter, the Bell 47. But I look forward to what you guys put together. I'll bring it up from time to time to keep everybody motivated. I got the note right here. Well, guys, we're approaching the 2-hour mark here. Actually, a little bit over, which is fine. But I have to go get packed. I got to go to work tomorrow. Kicking off on a 4-day trip, and I got to leave in the morning. So, real world calls. Acoustic version of the B-52s. Hey, if you can do a B-25 on floats, but I'd like to that works. You could maybe do a fictitious B-25 parasite fighter, like the German Mistel, with the B-25 as the bomb and the P-51 mounted on top, or perhaps a range extension for a fighter, B-25 with a crew with a Mustang on top full of drop tanks that it would fly across long distance, release it, and it would come back, or maybe a B-25 aerial tanker. I mean, if you're going to kit bash, use your imagination. And absolutely still you can send build in progress shots. In fact, when I do the viewers builds, you probably noticed a couple of times, sometimes folks will send me pictures of, and sometimes I'll work it in to show the finished product, or sometimes I'll lump them in the back as whatever's going on. Whatever you guys send me, because remember, this is not a contest. All we're doing is sharing a hobby. You don't have to only send the finished product. As long as the picture's in focus, we can make out what it is. I'll probably stick it, at least, some guys send a lot of photos and I cherry pick a few, and some folks send me just one picture. There is one thing I wanted to bring up real quick. Glad you guys mentioned that. I'm sure folks are using everything, the cameras and cell phones. One thing that I just would recommend, and it's absolutely not something you must do, but when you take a photograph of a model for the viewers builds, I'm just going to do one real quick right here. All right. Photo. Okay. Try to have about, I mean, if it's a photo you already have, don't worry about it. I'm just saying, try to have a lot of void area around the model. It makes it easier for me to crop the picture, is all. I try to avoid the big black edges when I can on the picture. Just try to keep them all filling. And also sometimes when you back off a little bit, the focus is often a little bit better. But something like that's fine. I can zoom in on it. It also, oops. And if you have a uniform color background, that the contrast, like just a gray bed sheet or something like that, to put it against, that helps a little bit. Mike Machat was talking about in one of his videos when artists put these paintings together, they have to be very careful that the outline of whatever they're painting doesn't blend at any spots in the background, which happens from time to time, especially with military equipment, where like in the Navy everything's painted gray, or the Army everything's painted green. So to get that contrast, to be able to see the work you did. Taking photos outside is always a great idea if you can just get a neutral background, because the lighting is ambient and warm. Not a big deal, just if you're, the further you back off and the more stuff that's out of the way of the actual image, just the better the image looks. That's all. And cell phones take such good cameras, good pictures these days, but I'm just, every once in a while you'll get this beautiful model, but the photo's in so close, and it's maybe a square picture that I either wind up with black borders or I have to, and sometimes a pan down looks good, but depends on the resolution of the photo. And it's not a big deal. Just trying to, make your stuff look good. And I got to head on out now. It's that time. Well, guys, I'm going to loop the intro video so you guys can chat amongst each other for a little while. Hope everybody is having a wonderful weekend. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you had a good time. Guys, we'll see you later. And as always, model on.